when you choose from a place of personal power and embodiment and truth, like you're again, like you step into that here I am confidence that's like so unwavering. It's so unshakable. Doesn't matter your relationship status, doesn't matter your title, doesn't matter how much money you make, like your energy speaks. And then everything just starts like I feel like if on paper right now, my life should be a fucking disaster. But I'm so happy and so joyful and so just like excited about what's to come because I'm living from a
Welcome to the Legalpreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Sager, founder and CEO of Legalpreneur Inc. As a serial entrepreneur and someone that works exclusively with small business owners legally protecting their business, I'm dedicated to covering common legal issues faced by business owners, providing you with the business knowledge you need to catapult your business's growth and showing you just how some of the world's most elite entrepreneurs have handled these legal and business issues themselves. In true attorney fashion, the information in this episode is not legal advice. This is for informational purposes only, and you should always consult with your attorney before implementing any of the information in the show. Hello there, welcome back. I am so excited for today's guest because I am joined by a very old dear friend, Melissa Martin, who is a business coach and embodiment coach, and she's the host of the Boldly Courageous podcast. I met her several years ago. I feel like when I was a baby business owner, I met her when I first joined Chris Harder's mastermind, and we have stayed connected, and so I'm really excited to have her on the podcast today. Melissa, thanks for joining me.
Oh, Andrea, thank you so much. Like I feel like that was a million years ago, and both of us were like so much has happened in both of our lives, and it's been a while. So I know this is going to be such a fun conversation. Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, I remember when I think you were one of my first phone calls when I knew that I was going to leave my ex-husband. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even know like where to even begin, how to handle this. And so I remember I called you and we talked for quite a while, and it's been a long journey since then. That was 2.5 years ago.
Crazy. That was called, it was in COVID. Like I ran because I was in California. Yeah.
It was craziness. Well, anyways, can you get started and tell the listeners how you got to where you are today?
Oh my gosh. Like how much time do we have?
All the time you need, sis.
Oh man. Life, this is always such an interesting conversation because you're like, where do I begin? Right. So the short version of I guess I'll kind of share it. It's interesting, right? Because life comes full circle in so many ways. And I feel like I'm in kind of a little bit of a full circle moment, but like most people, I went off to college, I got a degree and immediately went out into pursuing a corporate career. My background is in financial service management, and I worked in banks in the financial service industry for 15 years and was very much driven by the climbing the corporate ladder, like money and outward appearances, like having access to things, just like my confidence was really very much built on look at me, like look at what I've done, look at what I have, look at what I can do, look at how much money I make, look at my job title. And I would consider myself like very alpha A type, like achiever.
Yeah.
And in 2012, the hedge fund company that I was working with restructured their business model, and my division was eliminated and I got laid off. And it was one of those like defining moments for me where I was like, how did this even happen? Like I didn't do anything wrong, but it put me in a really difficult spot financially. And I fell into this deep depression. I felt like my self-worth was tied to my net worth, and I was in 6 figures of debt at that time. I had liquidated my 401k to live. Like it was a really dark time for me, but it gave me such a powerful opportunity to really look at my relationship to money and how like my spending habits and my relationship to like giving and receiving, and just it really unlocked a lot for me, even though I didn't know it at the time. Like Steve Jobs says, like you can't connect dots looking forward, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. And during that time, while I was trying to find another job that like financially would make sense, I got introduced to a network marketing company in the health and wellness space. I was really into fitness. I was doing fitness competitions, and I started to share the products with people. They were seeing my results. And very quickly, I realized that I had an opportunity to generate income in the meantime while I was looking for a real job. Right. And 7 years later, I had built a massive network marketing organization with well over 5,000 people, multiple six-figure earners, speaking on stages, traveling the country, doing leadership development, learning so much about personal growth and business and network marketing. I'm so grateful for it because it became like entrepreneurship with training wheels. Like it taught
Yeah.
me so much about leadership and growth, the things that I just didn't know working in the corporate world. It was just mind blowing to me. And during that time, I got married and I had owned a couple of different businesses in the fitness space. And I started building my own personal brand, and I was coaching people and learning a lot about digital marketing and social media. And that's how you and I met. I was in a mastermind and I was building a couple of other businesses, and things started to shift in the dynamics of my marriage. I started to learn a lot about polarity and masculine, feminine energetics, and doing a lot of like deep somatic work and healing work for childhood trauma and things that were all presenting in my marriage. And 2019 for me was another one of those like really powerful defining moments. A lot of loss, a lot of identity shifts. My ex-husband and I transitioned out of our marriage. The network marketing company that I was a part of restructured their model and went from a multi-level compensation plan to a single level compensation plan, which basically meant that 90% of my income was gone within 60 days. Um, and I also sold pretty much everything I owned and moved across the country from upstate New York to California, and kind of again, like was in that same place that I was in 2012 of like rock bottom, financially stressed, just ended my marriage, my business is gone, like, and so many nights, feeling so much anxiety about money and like what's going to be next, and looking on job boards and thinking, am I going to go back to work? And ultimately made the decision to go all in on entrepreneurship. And I remember just feeling really confused because on the one hand, I felt really sad and I was like grieving the loss of this relationship and what my identity was in that, and grieving the loss of my business and network marketing and my identity in that. But on the other hand, I was like so excited about the space that I had just gotten and how like my energy was good because I didn't have to worry about another person and all the time and effort I was putting into my marriage. And so it was like confusing because I was like sad and happy at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, so started building my coaching business, working with high level leaders in network marketing, working with high level entrepreneurs that really wanted to go from good to great. And over the past couple of years, like most people with entrepreneurship, I've had super high highs and I've had really low lows. And more recently, in the past couple of months, I've made the decision that I'm going to go back into the corporate world, which has been a whole ceremony in and of itself. Not abandoning my business, like I love what I do, but I think it's smart to have multiple revenue streams. I think the one thing that I've learned from working in the financial service industry and working with a network marketing company and then having my own business is that it's such a smart plan to have multiple income streams. And I feel like the past couple of years have shown me where I'm exposed to risk. And so my, kind of where I'm at now is still teaching, still coaching, still mentoring, still leading myself, but also stepping into something completely different and new, but not new, and kind of like coming full circle back to like 2012. Like, okay, like we're going to go back into the corporate world. We're going to take everything that we've learned over the past 10 years and apply it to something new and just see what comes from it.
I love your story and I think one of the reasons I'm excited to have this episode today is because I think you're giving permission to a lot of people, not that they need permission, but ju-
I want to relate this to also like divorce. I was scared to get divorced because I was like, oh my gosh, what are people going to think about me? And it's like, well, it doesn't fucking matter what people think about me. And it's the same thing. Like, oh, what are people going to think if I leave entrepreneurship and go back to the corporate world? It doesn't matter what people think. Like, what do you need? What do you need? And what do you desire? And ultimately, that's what it comes down to. And I was telling Melissa before our call, in 2022, I had more people ask me about filing for bankruptcy or just like shutting down the business than ever before. And the only reason I want to share that is because I think towards the end of last year, anybody listening for multiple episodes knew that I talked a lot about struggling because legalpreneur also struggled. We had our worst year, but I just wanted to share that way people know, like, if you're struggling, you're not alone. And it's I think 2022 was a collective struggle year. And what's so funny, not funny, but I had dinner with my friend Courtney last Friday, and we were talking about 2022 being such a big year of struggle, and then how we were seeing all the massive tech layoffs coming. But now, legalpreneur is doing great. A lot of clients that I've had talk about struggling, they're talking about doing great. And so we started talking like, oh my gosh, do you think the recession, quote unquote recession, that hit us way before it hit the corporate world? And so now, like, we're past it, and it just as now is hitting corporate.
Yeah.
Have any thoughts on that?
Oh, for sure. Like, I mean, I think everything is cyclical, right? Like, energetically speaking. And I don't know about you, but for me, I think, 2020 coming into 2021, like, I had this false sense of security in my business because I received some EIDL money, right? And it's like, you have this like fat stack of cash sitting in your account, and it gives you this like false sense of security. And something that I've had to look at when it comes to my business is like the motivation to create from overflow versus the motivation to create from lack. And in my entire blueprint of life, it's always been creating from a place of lack. Like, when I don't have something that I want, I go out and create. But when I have what I need, there's no like fire to like really keep that momentum going. And so I've had to really like work on that. And I think that is the entrepreneurial conundrum, right? Is like, okay, when things are like crappy, we can like make money out of thin air. We can launch something, we can create something. But like when life is good, we're also like probably burnt out. Like, by the time we make that money, we're so exhausted that we're like, I don't have the capacity to make more. Like, I actually remember sitting in Chris's mastermind and imagining, I think we were doing like a meditation or a journal prompt or something having to do with money. And I was imagining making $1 million. And the first thought that came forward for me was like, I don't have the energy for that. Because at that time I was making close to 300,000 a year between my coaching business, my network marketing business, and another business that I had. And I was exhausted. And I was like, if I'm working this hard right now to make 300K, I cannot work any harder to make $1 million. And obviously there's reasons behind that. Like, there's obviously work smarter, not harder. And like, there's a lot of components that go to that. But like, I think the roller coaster of feast or famine comes from that like burnout of pushing so hard for a financial goal, which you think is going to give you some sort of like stability. But then by the time you get there, you don't have the energy to keep pushing. So you take your foot off the gas a little bit. And then all the things that got you to where you are, there's a lagging indicator, right? It's always a 90-day lag. So if you're struggling right now in your business, look back 90 days and what did you stop doing, right? And then when you like go pedal to the metal and then you had this big pop, look back 90 days, what were you doing? And so it's that roller coaster, right? So for me personally, I recognize that I don't want to create anymore in my business from a place of need. Like, I truly desire to create from a place of overflow. And I think most people start their entrepreneurial journey because they have a desire for something more and they have a full-time job that becomes the financial backer for that. And I didn't have that luxury. So I think for me personally, like, I'm excited to have predictability for my financials, for my nervous system. Like, I just want predictability and stability every day.
in relationships, with my business. And that feels so fun and juicy to me. So if you're listening to this and you've got the mindset drama going on, like, what is your core value? What is the most important thing to you? And what would that provide you? That's what I would ask you.
Yeah, I love that. I want to talk about identity because you said something about your identity, I think, being tied. I can't remember if you said it was tied to your initial corporate job or your marriage, but I also struggled with that when I left my marriage. I remember, I think 2021 was a big year of struggling with my identity because I had no motivation for my law firm. I was making $1 million in my sleep. I mean, I was working maybe 20 hours, but I was just like, I don't want to take another fucking phone call talking about another trademark. And so 2022 was really our year of transitioning from law firm to legalpreneur. But 2022 was also so so much has happened since September 2020 when I left. But 2021 was a year of learning, I think, about my childhood trauma and actually deconstructing. And 2022 was a big year of actually healing that. So 2021 was uncovering, deconstructing, really getting to the root of everything. 2022 was a big year of healing all of that. And towards the end of 2022, I realized it hit me that the reason I was so unmotivated with my law firm is because that that part of me was tied so much to my marriage, and I just had no desire. And so once I finally realized, like, I am a brand new person, I have new desires, new motivations, I was motivated again with the law firm. So now we're at this beautiful place of where I get to balance the two of legalpreneur and the law firm, which has been a long time coming. But I would love to hear your perspective on the identity stuff as well, because I know a lot of people listening are like, oh my gosh, they probably don't know how to identify it and identify their identity issues.
Yeah.
But that's what I struggled with for a long time. And once I was realized, oh my gosh, this is why, it was a huge moment for me.
Mm, I love that you shared that, and I think that there's so many layers to this, and what it really comes down to is embodiment, right? Like, embodiment is a big buzzword right now in the personal development space, and when I really think about embodiment, to me, it's the difference between, like, what I shared earlier, which is like the look at me confidence, which is really very much rooted in those identities and rooted in manipulation and imposter syndrome, versus like to me, like, real embodiment of confidence is here I am. Like, you and your energy and your presence walks into a room before you do. It has nothing to do with your title. It has nothing to do with how much money you make. It's all about doing the inner work and knowing what makes you happy, what's in alignment, what are your core values, and you're living in truth to that. But the thing about identities and titles and confidence is it's really confusing, right? And I know that I felt this on a very deep level. It's like when you're achieving at a high level and, from the outside looking in, people see, the perfect marriage and a beautiful home and the kids and all the activities, and they see the highlight reel on social media, or they see the beautiful car that you drive, or the awards that you're winning at work, or the degree that you just got. People celebrate you for that, and it becomes really confusing because we think that this is what makes us valuable. We think that the title of our job or the relationship status that we have, or the perfectly curated Instagram feed is what makes us valuable because other people celebrate it. And they comment on, like, wow, like, you inspire me because of this, or like, I really look up to you because of that. And so on some level, there's this like fear that if people really knew what was going on behind closed doors, they wouldn't tell the same story about who I am, right? And so this need for validation, this look at me confidence texture on some level is very much rooted in manipulation, right? Because we want other people to tell a story about us that we probably don't even believe ourselves, but we think that in order for people to love us, to accept us, to respect us, to validate us, um, that we need to check all those boxes in their mind. So it's like you're trying to like create this facade and keep up this story and like what, but it's exhausting. And so you're not really living true to who you are. And it's like this posturing of pretending. And like after a while, that just gets so exhausting. And that's where you see people go through midlife crises. They just burn everything to the fucking ground. And they're like, they love their business, they quit their jobs, they leave a marriage, they shave their head, they like go on sabbatical for a year. They eat, pray, love their way through like life because it's like they're so tired of living up to the title or living up to other people's expectations and go through that like dark night of the soul, right? And really look at like what is it that I truly desire. And so I'm obviously speaking from experience, like this has been my life in so many ways. And so I believe that like every failure plants seeds for your success to blossom, right? And again, like hindsight's 2020. And so when I just for me personally, like when I think about everything that I've gone through with, losing my job in the corporate world to navigating sisterhood wounds in my network marketing business to like leaving my marriage to building my business to navigating dating. Oh my God, like that's a whole nother, that's a whole, like, oh my God, and like heartache and boundaries and standards and personal power and like self-abandonment and like self-worth. Like every single time it comes back to like, am I living in alignment with what I truly desire, or am I living in alignment with a story I want somebody else to tell about me? And like, man, when you really sit with that and you see all the ways you've been out of integrity and all the ways you've been manipulative, it's like, like that personally is great because it gives you a choice to decide something different. And when you choose from a place of personal power and embodiment and truth, like you're again, like you step into that here I am confidence that's like so unwavering, it's so unshakable. Doesn't matter your relationship status, doesn't matter your title, doesn't matter how much money you make, like your energy speaks. And then everything just starts like I feel like if on paper right now my life should be a fucking disaster. But I'm so happy and so joyful and so just like excited about what's to come because I'm living from a place of here I am, right?
Yeah.
All these titles, like the titles are irrelevant to me.
Yeah. And I feel like it's so opposite. Like whatever it is on paper, how we're actually feeling, typically it is opposite. And I think for me, the goal is always, okay, not that I care about what other people think, but if my life were on paper, do I feel in alignment with that? And I think when those things are in alignment, that's when you figured it out. Like you've got it all figured out, which is not easy. I know you have done a ton of work. The past 2.5 years for me has just been this deep, beautiful, beautiful, deep, deep, deep healing journey. But it's not easy. And I'm curious if somebody were to come and they're like, okay, I'm lost. I am there having that quarter life crisis, the midlife crisis. I know I haven't been living true to me. Like on paper, my life looks perfect, but inside I'm miserable. Where do I even start? Like, what do you tell that person?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things, and I love a good framework. Like I'm a framework person, like give me a roadmap and a framework. And I'm also someone who is really like, I can take things that feel very like complex and sort of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like complex and hard to describe. And I can break them down into like systematized things. So just through the many opportunities for growth I've had throughout my life, I've been able to reflect back and kind of observe and notice like the cycle, the pattern that I've kind of walked myself through when it comes to moving from one dynamic to another, whether it was like a mindset shift around money or like realizing that I'm not living true to who I am. So the first thing I would say first and foremost is get support, get help. That's what I did. I know that's what you did.
We saw the same coach. It just hit me. I just remembered that. Oh my gosh. Yes. And I've mentioned it. I've had her on the podcast. Her name is Melissa.
Melissa. Melissa was like, and I've had several, like I've recognized, I think you get to a point where you realize like everything that you've done is not working and perhaps you need to like phone a friend, right? And sometimes your friends are not the ones you actually phone.
Yeah.
And so I'm a big fan of support, whatever that looks like, whether it's a coach or a therapist or a healer. I've had them all. And when it came to navigating my trauma in my childhood, particularly around my sexuality and feeling safety in my body and navigating that through my marriage, Melissa was so hugely helpful and has continued to be a support system for me to learn how to use my voice and find safety in my body. So the first thing I would say is seek professional help. That's number one. The second thing is I'll just share my framework for embodiment and personal power. And I love this framework because it's something that can happen literally within, like you can walk yourself through it in the matter of 30 seconds, or it can be a process that you walk yourself through a little bit more intentionally and more deeply. And so the framework is the acronym for the word power. And this is all about personal power, right? And the first place that we really start is we just pause and we bring presence to like, what is the current reality? So like, if you're already in the place of feeling unhappy or stuck or knowing that like you're living for everyone else, the first place is to like really take inventory of that and really become so acutely present to what it is that is going on. Like for me, I remember when it was something having to do with money, I noticed that every time someone would invite me to something, I would immediately want to say yes. And the first thought is, but how much does it cost? Like I probably can't afford it. And just noticing the disempowerment that I had there and just really bringing presence to it because we can't change what we can't see. The second is once you have that presence, the next phase is observe. And observing is really about going back to the root cause of when did this first start? Like something that I've had to work through in my life so much is sisterhood wounds and people pleasing when it comes to female relationships and the need to always prove myself in female relationships. And so as I walked myself through this process, I remember when I was in first grade, I had moved to a new school and there were these two girls, Andrea and Jen, that were besties and they were really beautiful and like had nice clothes and I wanted to be their friend. And I walked up to them on the playground and I was like, I really want to be friends with you. And they said to me, well, in order, like we're really fast runners and in order to be friends with us, like you also have to be a fast runner. So like it's an obstacle course that you need to complete within this certain amount of time, right? I mean, this is like, I live with a 6.5-year-old right now. And I'm like, I could totally see her doing this, right? Like you don't know what you're doing, but like, I'm sure you can guess how this went, right? So I'm like, I'm going to do this. And I run as fast as I can. And they're like, yeah, sorry, you didn't run fast enough. You can't be our friend. And so in that moment, I created this belief that in order to be friends with women that I look up to, I have to be good enough. I have to perform. I have to overgive. Like I have to overdo, right? So the observation point is really about going back to like that first memory or like when did this first like show up in your life and really observing that story and like how the domino effect has trickled up because it's just a story, right? Like it's literally like it's what happened and then the story that you create. And once you do that, then the next phase is welcome. And welcome is all about welcoming in a new story, welcoming in a new reality. And this is where we really like future trip on like, okay, the future version of us that already knows the answers, that has it all figured out, that is like embodied and empowered and like living her best life. Like, how would she walk herself through this situation, whether it's money or relationships or your marriage, or like, what would she do? How would she feel? How would she be living her life? What would she wear? What kind of like food would she eat? Like literally like future trip into Never Never Land and know how that feels in your body.
Yeah.
And then from there, you know, those three phases are pretty simplistic. But where shit really hits the fan is Embody. And this is where we take action based on where we're going, not on where we've been. So if the future version of you would not, drink every single night and fall asleep watching Netflix and scroll her cell phone every single morning, if she would, eat healthy and respect her body and read books and meditate in the morning, then you have to start doing that every single day. And the embodiment piece is taking those small steps towards where you want to go, not continually reinforcing where you've been. And this is the hardest part because, to your point earlier, like, it's going to require difficult conversations. It's going to require like shaking things up a bit. It might require burning everything to the fucking ground. But that's where you build radical trust with yourself, because your word becomes law with you before it becomes law with anybody else.
Yeah.
And this is how we build real, like, here I am confidence. And then the last component is release and rejoice. And so this is all about forgiveness and celebration. And it's like, part of that is like, do I need to forgive something within myself, like past version of me, for not knowing any better, right? Like, I was just doing the best I could. For me, it was a lot of forgiveness of my ex-husband, a lot of forgiveness of my parents, like being able to see my mom with compassion, seeing my dad with compassion, understanding that, like, even though I might think at times they did a shit job, they were doing the best they could with the tools they had. And so that release is like so cathartic, but also amazing. And then rejoice is all about celebrating the small wins, like really continually reinforcing, like, if you do wake up the next morning and you don't scroll social media and you meditate for 10 minutes, like, celebrate that, like positive reinforcement. So that is my framework for personal power. It's welcome, observe. I'm sorry. It's pause, observe, welcome, embody, and release and rejoice.
I love that. Oh my gosh, I love it. And I see like all how I have personally gone through all of those steps. And I will say what feels the best but the hardest is the embodiment. And I think last year, August of 2022, I did a plant medicine ceremony. I did Kana. And yeah, like what? Listen, what, Melissa, knowing who I am today versus like 3 or 4 years ago when we met, completely different person. Anyway, so I did this Kana ceremony, and it was so beautiful because it just felt like everything was finally coming full circle. And finally, like, oh my, I've spent so many years now, or so many years, I spent the past 2 years literally just like rewriting my story. And now it's finally coming together to truly be who I am meant to be who I know I am. And I remember the first night I was so like, just ultimately just realized how much I do love myself, because that was a big thing. We say we love ourselves and we're worth this and we're this, and it's like, no. If you allow treatment that certain treatment that we've allowed in the past, like, you don't love yourself, because if you did, you would not allow that. So it's so funny because now one of my good friends, Courtney, when we're like struggling and processing something, I'm just like, okay, Courtney, we have to remember, do I love myself as much as Andrea loved herself the first night of our Kana ceremony? Because if not, we have to get there. Like that, oh my God. Like, and now it's just like embodying and remembering that first night. Oh my gosh. Like, it's right now, I'm just like feeling my body on fire because that night was just the most beautiful thing. And since then, it really feels like everything has come together, which has been just absolutely beautiful, because the past 2.5 years has been a roller coaster.
Well, like, to use the tornado, like, as the analogy, right? It's like the tornado, like, comes through and rips everything up. But then, like, what comes out on the other side of that is you rebuild something even stronger and more stable, and then you're more prepared. So the next time the tornado comes, maybe everything doesn't get ripped down, but like the foundation stays, right? So the next time you rebuild even stronger, and love that.
Yeah. Well, Melissa, this has been incredible. I know we could sit here and talk for hours, but for now, we will let everyone go. But before we do, make sure you tell everybody, where can they find you?
the podcast, everything. Yeah. So my favorite place to hang out is Instagram. I'm at the Melissa Martin on all the places. You can find me everywhere. But Instagram's my favorite place to hang out. You can find out, where I'm at in life right now. I'm kind of like a little bit of a digital nomad at the moment. So like with the going out in the world, what offers I have, you can find links to all my programs, and then you can head over to all the podcast platforms wherever you listen to podcasts and check out the Boldly Courageous podcast, where I share a lot more like behind the scenes of my life, but I also have incredible conversations with people like you and so many other awesome experts. We talk about everything from like sex and relationships to money and investing to building business to plant medicine and embodiment. Like there's
I love it.
It's also come hang out with me on Instagram and on iTunes.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Here at Legalpreneur, we're committed to providing a supportive legal community for all business owners. I know how scary the legal stuff can be. If you found this information helpful, I would be so grateful if you could share it with a fellow business owner. And quite frankly, it doesn't cost anything to rate, review, or subscribe to the show. Your support helps me reach more listeners, which allows me to support more business owners in their entrepreneurial journey. Have any questions or comments about the show? Feel free to drop me a line on Instagram. I promise I read all of the messages and comments. And if you want to be a guest on the show or know someone that would make a great guest, simply fill out our application form and a team member will reach out if we think it's a good fit. I'll see you in the next episode.